describing comments made by the MP Lee Anderson about the Mayor of London as wrong and unacceptable. Mr Anderson, the former Conservative Deputy Chairman, said the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, was controlled by Islamists and he lost the Tory whip when he refused to apologise. Mr Khan, who represents the Labour Party, said the comments were Islamophobic, anti-Muslim and racist. Raheel Mohammed is the founder and director of Maslaha, a charity that tackles inequalities and discriminations faced by Muslim communities. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for being with us. And first of all, tell us what you thought about Lee Anderson's comments last week.
I mean, Lee Anderson is an ignorant, racist man, but his comments mean him as an individual mean less, actually. It's what he represents. And the reason why the Prime Minister isn't using the word Islamophobia and isn't talking about racism is because he wants to kind of keep the conversation at the level of there's one bad apple in the party. And it's not about one bad apple. It's about Islamophobia as a systemic form of racism that influences legislation, it influences our public institutions. And that's the conversation that we need to be having, not about what one individual says to another individual, because that's harmful to that individual. But really, what we're looking at right now is how Islamophobia trickles down from the government. It comes from rhetoric, it comes from the laws that they pass, and it has a real impact in communities, in spaces that are supposed to be safe. So, we're seeing it impact on children as young as 6. And so it's what Lee Anderson represents that I think is the conversation that we should be having.
Yeah, what do you make? We will talk about that. I just want to know what you make of the Prime Minister's words this morning. He said that Lee Anderson's words were wrong and unacceptable. There's been criticism that the government weren't quick enough to deal with this situation from some quarters. What do you make of his comments this morning? Is that enough? He wants to take the heat out of the situation, in his words. Will it do that?
No, I mean, it hasn't. It hasn't taken the heat out. And, if you are somebody who's Muslim, from a racialised community, black and brown, you understand the impact of racism and Islamophobia on a daily basis. Now, Oliver Dowden said that if he had apologised, if Lee Anderson had apologised, he probably still would be in a job. And so we still then would have somebody who has racist views, racist practice, sitting in a very powerful position. He was on the Home Affairs Committee. He's voting on legislation. And, he didn't suddenly appear out of nowhere like a sort of a racist peacock in all of his racist glory. That's the person that has been in close to government, since at least 2019 and as a councillor before. So it hasn't taken the heat out of the situation. And I think we need to really understand Islamophobia as a systemic problem, not as an individual problem. And also, what are the conditions that allow somebody like Lee Anderson to continue? Why is it that nobody senior in government can just say the word Islamophobia? Why can't they talk about racism? What is it that's preventing them doing that? And the answer is that they don't want to tackle this wider issue that affects, runs through all of government and through our public institutions.
Yeah, you say it's a systemic problem in the Conservative Party. In what way? What evidence do you have of that?
So it's a systemic problem throughout society. So to give you an example, there is a policy called PREVENT, which is a counter-terrorism policy, and it means that our teachers, our doctors, our nurses, people that are in spaces of safety are forced to become terrorist cops. They're forced to report on signs of possible extremism. So we have children as young as 6 in this country being referred onto this counter-terrorism policy. The referrals tend to lead nowhere. 90% of referrals tend to lead nowhere. But we have a government that has accepted the recommendations of an independent review, a so-called independent review. It wasn't really an independent review, into PREVENT. And that policy is discriminatory. So the fact that the government is comfortable with that policy, and successive governments have been comfortable with that policy, means that there's a real lack of understanding of the harm and the violence that is done to Muslim and other racialised communities.
OK. Raheel Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts this morning. Thank you.